So this is kind of the first video I have really gotten around to putting out. I've waffled a little bit on content creation and that sort of thing in the past and kind of failed to get around to it largely because I think I struggle a bit with the pressure of committing to throwing myself upon that breaking wheel of social media engagement. But I also feel like I have kind of found a format that more or less works pretty well for me. So I'm probably just gonna do a little bit of talking, like stream of consciousness style, and clean it up later. And y'all can kind of get the end product of that. Um, that aside, I think at the moment I want to talk a little bit about just some Boltyn stuff. I had won a pro quest last season on the hero, and I got some questions about my deck list, about how to approach certain things. And by the time I had gotten around to really trying to put a bow on my thoughts about the cards from Compendium, not only were they a known quantity, but Compendium season was over, and we're getting Armory deck Hala. Not to date this, but last night they announced Mastery Pack Warrior. So I think that the Compendium stuff has come and gone just a little bit. Still gonna talk about it. Gonna give kind of my rapid fire thoughts on most of the relevant cards in Compendium. I'm probably not going to touch on stuff if it's so bad we all kind of agree that it's more or less completely unplayable. And then talk a little bit more in depth about some of those Armory deck Hala cards. So first thing I want to touch on today with the Compendium stuff is Duty Bound Blitz. I personally believe in playing 6 copies of this card. I've been playing 3 red, 3 yellow. I think it's just quite efficient, super above rate. It's a yellow card, it's light. Its big downside is the condition on which you can play it, which is sometimes an issue, other times not. Blessing of Bona, something that really smooths this out, is also in the set. We'll kind of get to that card. And the 2-block. The 2-block is a very real downside. That has definitely reared its head. Sometimes I can very much empathize with maybe trimming this card down to 4 or 5, but I don't really believe in playing any less than all 3 reds. Also in Compendium we got Soulbond Belief. I can kind of see the vision with this card, but ultimately I just don't think it's very good, but I am also not somebody who really believes in that Prayer of Bona style, flip the top card of your deck with a certain density of yellows kind of gameplay. I think the floor is a little too sad when you whiff, which is something I find kind of frustrating. And I also just think that when you're looking for a 0 for 4, there are a lot of other better options. You can just play Illuminate. It's not going to always put a card in your soul. They can interact with it, but it also can't whiff on being worth 4. So kind of my short thoughts on that card. Roaring Beam before I get into the 2 Majestics that the set gave us. This card is crazy. I feel like I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Whenever I resolve this card. It's obviously craziest turn 0 and obviously craziest in conjunction with some of our other more powerful cards like Blessing of Bona, Spirit of Irina, that sort of thing. But even in the situation where you kind of just get to attack your opponent, put a card in soul, put some amount of value on the board, make a couple courages, arsenal the best card out of your hand going first. I really like this card. I think it's super duper duper powerful. I play 2 at the moment, I believe. It's not really something I want 3 of because despite it being really powerful in the right scenarios, it's not great when you already have a whole bunch of soul. Outside of some pretty sweet niche interactions with cards like Beacon of Victory, where you can attack, beacon it, to empty your soul, and then Roaring Beam, in response to the beacon, and then go search. But for the most part, great card. Don't want to draw too many copies. Blunton. I think I was a bit higher on this card when it first got spoiled. Now I feel just okay about it. It's great marionette hate. I would probably play at least 2, maybe 3. It'll also be strong against heroes like Hala, though she has this tendency to fully empty her hand out before actually getting to the attacking you part, so could depend a little bit there. Not, the most complex card. It's a block card. It does exactly one thing, but in the matchups where doing that one thing is good, I like it a lot. I also think it's lost a fair bit of equity with Mandible Claw living the format. I think Brute was actually for sure one of the best targets for Blunton. So that's a little bit sad as far as the equity of that card is concerned. And then the last pen card I want to touch on, Blessing of Bona. This was my spoiler card. Um, I think this card is really, really, really powerful. It's like a yellow 3 block. I think the way I have kind of thought about this card is if there was a yellow non-attack that said, your next attack gets +3, put this in your soul, go again. That card would be like completely, utterly bonkers, and this is not quite that. But I think in about half of the scenarios that this card can come up, this card is better, and in the other half, it's a little bit worse than that. But really hard to complain about. Yellow 3 block, it's a light card. I know that you can kind of only justify so many cards in the deck by saying it's a yellow light card that blocks 3. I can block it or charge it. Blah 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 blah. Like there are still scenarios where that is like a real downside. If you draw the card when it's not good, you can't always charge every card or block every card in your hand. But ultimately, I think this card is quite strong. And should probably just be a 3 of in every Boltyn deck forever going forward. Feels very much like stacking Rune Chance, where you just like put a whole ton of value on the board. Now some of the newer stuff, the stuff that I actually wanted to really get into the nitty-gritty of in this video. We have Edict of Steel. This was the first card spoiled from the Hawa Armory deck. Sharpen target sword you control, put a +1 counter on it, remove all +1 counters from it at the end of turn. If it has 1 or more +1 counters, create a flurry token. And flurries let you attack an additional time with a sword and pop on weapon swing, much like quickens pop on like any attack played, or embodiments pop on attack action card, blah 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 blah. So essentially this card converts as a 0 for 5 in Boltyn, because our sword is completely free as long as we've charged. It's a 3 power, so you just get to go 4/4 as opposed to your base rate of 3. It's like very similar math to Lumina Ascension. I think this card is very strong. I think basically the only question with this card is how many non-light cards you can tolerate to fit in your deck, and what you are trimming to fit this card in your deck, because what I will say is that, especially after a lot of the Compendium stuff, my deck has been, for maybe the first time in a while, I'm usually an advocate for playing the strong generics, but like almost completely light cards. I think the deck I won a PQ on this season was all light cards except for like Sink Below and Snatch, but I can kind of see migrating away from that for a little bit of power back in that regard. But yeah, I think this card is very strong. Converts as a 0 for 5. Seems like an obvious include. Largest question is just deck space. And I want to talk about all 3 of the playable flurry generators for Boltyn. There's also this card, Toe the Line. The next time you would be dealt damage this turn, prevent 2 of that damage. If you prevent damage this way, create a flurry token, 0 cost red warrior instant. This card is really interesting to me because I generally think of Boltyn, especially in his more modern incarnations, as a particularly aggressive Flesh and Blood deck. I know some people kind of believe in that Soulbond Resolve style of deck that I generally don't really play. I have not included Soulbond Resolve in a deck list in quite some time. But I do think that this card kind of creates a scenario where you really could play something a little bit more, I'm going to use the M word, mid-rangey with this hero, kind of playing some of your smaller hands. If you have these like 2-card charge hands after doing some blocking with Toe the Line, you can just like Beaming Bravado, Raiden. That's like particularly high value on just 3 cards. 4th card can really be whatever, but it's like Toe the Line essentially converts for 5, much like Edict of Steel, except instead of sharpening and that counter being worth 2 offensive points, you just kind of block for 2. Very similar cards. From a higher level perspective, with how they fit into Boltyn. It's just how your deck leans. I think there is a bit of an issue with being more mid-rangey in Boltyn at the moment, which is I think a lot of decks have stronger and more inevitable weapon options than we do, which presents some issues in terms of like running out of cards. If you're just going to sit there and grind value against your opponent forever, you do need a way to eventually close the game. And while I do think that Via the Vanguard and Lumina Ascension are excellent answers to that question, I think that even with Toe the Line, you may still be forced to play something like a Tunic build as opposed to Soulbond, because I don't suspect, if you just sit there and block with Toe the Lines, and like block your hands away and play these 2-card hands, you can grind really high value hands all day long, but we're not going to be particularly effective at actually killing the opponent, especially with how prevalent cards like Remembrance are at the moment. So, a bit of an interesting question. Boltyn not great at winning that fatigue race, but I do think this card represents some really high value turn cycles. So, kind of my conclusion on this, maybe a little bit more of an anti-aggro card that gives you a little bit more breathing room against decks you do want to block against. I think I would have really liked this card against Syndra, for an example. Shut down a Flick or a Throw Dagger at a crucial juncture, get a Flurry token, generate a fair bit of value in that sense. But in the current meta, it's interesting. We might kind of have to see how things evolve and take shape, especially after Acilio's terminal diagnosis catches up with him. um, and then lastly, I want to touch on Gleam of the Blade. I think this card is probably not very playable in Boltyn, especially on account of the 2 block, but it is legal and new for him, so I wanted to kind of touch on it. Um, Probably basically fully unplayable, but if there is ever a world where we really want to just like abuse flurry shenanigans in conjunction with things like Lumina Ascension, I could see this card being, a valid, viable setup card. You just like top deck this off of a snatch or something and you just bin it, swing twice. Because I do think flurries in conjunction with Lumina Ascension are like obviously really, really crazy powerful. Ultimately, I'm feeling pretty good about where Boltyn is in the metagame right now. Feeling pretty good about the power level of the deck. I like a lot of these new tools a lot. I will probably do some kind of follow-up, especially once the holodeck is actually out, and I've had a little bit more time to play games in person, in paper. But feeling pretty good. What a kind of refiguring. I think a lot of puzzle pieces with some of these new cards. I think Edict of Steel obviously has to find a place in the deck. Toe the Line might. And I think it's possible that those cards can shift the kind of general philosophy of how the deck is built. Right now, I think of it as pretty aggressive, but I could see those cards changing that. So probably some sort of follow up in the future. Typically, at the end of these videos, what I'm going to do is like a bit of a viewer comments, viewer questions, kind of thing at the end. But since I don't have that for this one, please just let me know what y'all thought of this. I tried to preserve a bit more of a conversational tone. That is how I like to approach a lot of like content angles, like casting, that sort of thing, whatever. Yeah, just let me know if you liked the video, if you had any thoughts, if you found it helpful, and yeah, hit me with any questions you might have for next time. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.